Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric John from IAB, and welcome to Convergence in Media Entertainment, Digital Advertising at the Digital Edge, Automation and Programmatic for OTT Video Operators. With a panel that we'll introduce in a moment, but just want to kind of introduce this with a kind of an overview of what this is about. So, digital video, what this whole panel and conference is about is literally eating the internet. According to Cisco, by 2021, 1 million minutes of video content will cross the internet every second, representing about 82% of consumer internet traffic. Television streamed by IP will be 26% of internet video traffic, and live internet video will account for 13%. So as a result, total video ad revenue, including mobile and desktop, rose to $5.2 billion in the first half of last year, up 36% from last year. And digital video growth is growing even more momentum, thanks to mobile and now OTT. So amidst this whole landscape is consumers. We're all following the consumer to different screens and to different platforms, and the desire for advertisers to connect with those consumers. Do you hear me? Test. Better?
That's better.
So,
Much better.
what we're going to talk about this afternoon is advertising and that desire for every advertiser to connect with consumers across OTT and different platforms. I'm going to open up with our panel here. Why don't we introduce each of us? Adam, why don't you tell what you do and who you work for?
So I'm Adam Lowy. I head sales for Sling TV, as well as Advanced TV for Dish Network.
Randy?
Hi, I'm Randy Cook. I work for SpotX. We are a programmatic infrastructure modern ad server, working with media owners, programmers, broadcasters, and digital video publishers to bring their inventory to advertisers to help them monetize that inventory.
Jordan?
Jordan Casale, Vice President Strategy at Index Exchange. We're a programmatic exchange for trading any form of media, including video.
Great. And Brian?
Yeah, my name's Brian Lilly. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Equinix. And after this panel, you will all need a drink. So come to our booth. And fortunately, we get to work with all these guys as this whole ecosystem has evolved. It's evolved largely in our interconnected data centers. So we're seeing it happen as we speak.
So first thing we want to talk about is, what are the marketplaces that are forming? We talked about consumers playing out across different platforms and screens. Let's talk about OTT. In particular, what are the marketplaces that are forming around OTT, and how are advertisers seeing that opportunity? So Adam, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So we've been in the market, the advertising market, for a little over 3 years now, and what we're seeing is tremendous growth in the programmatic space. We're seeing tremendous growth with addressable advertising. We're seeing tremendous growth also from cross-platform. So one of our plans was to take the Dish business and the Sling business and be able to sell both together, do an audience buy, and find them across both platforms. That's been pretty successful for us. And what's essentially happening is we went into this as a digital business with the digital underpinnings, ad serving one-to-one through freewheel for our source, and we wanted to get the digital advertisers. So we've got actually both now, in terms of the digital side of the house and the TV side of the house, both getting into this OTT live streaming and VOD space. So it's really kind of changing the marketplace. It's changing our discussions out there. One thing I want to say is when we go out and we're selling and we're going to advertisers, the first thing we say, our sales folks and our AEs, is, how do you want to buy? And when they go to an agency and say that, you've got all sides of the house listening, whether again it's TV, digital, the programmatic person, the addressable advanced TV person, and it's really being able to put every kind of piece of advertising on television together into kind of one sales opportunity.
So Randy, is OTT a mainstream offering at this point? You know, clearly consumers are, how many folks here have skinny bundles, watching TV via Hulu, so it's obviously a big consumer trend. Do advertisers see it that way, as a mainstream opportunity?
Mainstream, I don't think we're quite there yet, but it's no longer a fringe or a flyer to place your investments in OTT. I think what we're finding is that because OTT, connected television, is natively addressable, it can really represent any concept an advertiser or a brand has about what TV should be and how they choose to engage their target consumers. And the ability to aggregate up these marketplaces based on singular impressions and aggregating those up across whether it's national or local geo. What it does is it gives the brand now either a strategic or a tactical execution that they never had before. And I think they're becoming more commonplace, but I don't know that in terms of gross reach that we would see OTT becoming the dominant medium in a TV mix for probably a few more years. But it's definitely an accepted medium, an increasingly accepted medium. And I think what you're finding is a lot more brands willing to engage in conversations about how connected TV belongs in the TV ecosystem, while simultaneously working with their digital buyers on the other side to affect some very tactical outcomes. So that's OTT in a nutshell right there.
So Jordan, this is becoming much more of a data-driven audience targeting opportunity. We mentioned programmatic, which is the automated buying and selling of inventory and audience. Your platform enables that automation. What's this doing to workflows and the ability for, can advertisers seamlessly reach those consumers across platforms? How is that, what's the current state of automation, would you say?
So, I mean, the way I look at programmatic is it's a fulfillment channel, and it's sitting there as, at least, historically as we've evolved all these standards around programmatic, it appears to be the most effective way to transact both on identity and just simplifying that agency workflow. And so what we're trying to do as an exchange is take those base principles, take standards that come from bodies like the IAB, and apply them to use cases of video at scale for OTT applications. And that seems like the path that we're on. We're definitely not there yet. It's all quite nascent, but it looks like that's what the future holds for us, for sure.
So Brian, you live in the world where these assets are sitting on servers, are being called across the cloud, et cetera. I'm always astounded at an event like this how much it seems, we're in the future, but very much almost in the past in terms of how assets are managed and the workflow, and people still FTP files and things like that. Why isn't more of this being handled in a more seamless, tag-based, kind of more cloud-based approach? What's holding people back right now?
Well, I think standards, I think Jordan's comment about standards is one, so I think IAB plays a role there. I also think that, we have about 190 companies, customers that are part of this ecosystem that are with Equinix. But I think as things have moved to the cloud, there's been some dialogue around what should move to the cloud, what stays on premise, how do we get the partners, this ecosystem, in the same place as really, in some cases, as frenemies, but working together to solve this problem collectively for the end user. And then when I think about, we've got a pretty large financial ecosystem at Equinix, and this trading platforms and trading systems evolved over years. And one of the things that they used to talk about that I think is applicable here is that you have to engineer out latency. And when you think about this latency, the latency is across platforms. It's if you have some workflows in the cloud, some on premise, and then actually all the way out to the consumer, whether it's through a Comcast head end or a Wi-Fi network or an LTE network, you've got to engineer out that latency throughout that supply chain. And I don't think all members of the ecosystem are thinking about it that way as a system end to end.
Yeah,
it really is an organism.
It is an organism, yeah.
We have an incredibly small amount of time to make an ad decision. So it's anywhere we can optimize, milliseconds allow us to solicit a lot more opportunity and drive up yield. So we're always looking for opportunities to do that, and we love working with our competitors. I mean, I think we live in a world where everybody's integrating with everybody, and we're looking for that shared efficiency. And I think that places to trade that offer that are going to be well suited to the future that we're moving into.
So you're talking about, in a way, the consumer experience underneath all this, and we all when we're watching in either in an OTT environment or even in mobile, video on mobile. We've all experienced buffered ads, buffered content, and typically the one that gets a black eye is whatever service is providing it. But do we need kind of a new way of thinking about the KPIs or the ways to measure that quality of experience? How do you guys think about that at Dish? You know, that consumer at the center.
It's the most important thing. I mean, look, it's funny with what we're doing because we're on both sides of the house where we have a traditional satellite or MVPD business and the Sling business, and the churn rate is obviously much different in the Sling business. I mean, you could cancel and get a new service within seconds. And that's something that makes the consumer experience so much more important, and it has to be precise and quick and to the point. And that is something that we look at all the time. And when we're looking at churn rate and we're doing those comparisons, it's just not comparable. And the price point as well makes that a higher churn business. So it's more important than ever. The technical side is look, we were not able to launch this product without a sound technical team and business and guys over at EchoStar over there. I mean, a couple booths over just did a tremendous job in getting this set and getting it right. When you start to add dynamic ad insertion in live streaming television, and every advertiser you work with starts to put bells and whistles and different things into the ad call and different types of information they need back, it just makes it harder and puts more stress on your player, puts more stress on the ecosystem, and it just made things much more harder to do to make a perfect sequence in advertisement. That we used to call it that spinning circle of death. And really, we've done a tremendous job, getting rid of that and really working on the consumer. But there's nothing more important than that right now.
So you just talked about some things that are changing in the ad experience. If you watched the Olympics this year, you saw 6-second ads, you saw live box on box. All these different formats are coming to play. And in the context of live in particular, this gets really interesting. The ability to dynamically insert an ad for the right audience to the right household. And then you overlay the fact that the ability to reach a particular audience, at scale. This all means that the ad needs to appear in milliseconds. What do you guys see, with live being an increasing part of the equation, as Cisco pointed out? What does live do to measuring audiences and then ultimately delivering that ad?
So in a live linear environment, so live and linear are actually there's actually a distinction between the two. So for instance, you can be like on the ESPN app watching a live game, not necessarily a linear stream. That live game is a feature in the app that content only exists as one feature in that app. That ad load is going to be the exact same as the same game that's coming through a traditional cable box as a traditional broadcast. So we do from a technical standpoint have to view them equitably. And what we have to prepare for is the fact that one, connected TV, I like to say, is a reach of one. You're talking about one device, one decision. And if we get to a point, not if, but when we get to a point where a streaming audience nationally is the equivalent of one full rating point, we are looking at 1.2 million household ad opportunities coming up concurrently. So that's 1.2 million ad decisions that have to be made in a live environment. All of this with no ability to really buffer ads ahead of time. So we have to almost hack that transaction so that a DSP that might be receiving here's 1 million ad opportunities, all from the same publisher in the exact same moment in time. This is not ad fraud, and you want to be able to make sure that your infrastructure can scale to be able to compete all 1 million ad opportunities. So there is a challenge that I think is distinguished from an on-demand environment where you have a predetermined ad load and effectively sort of this hidden ability to buffer an ad inside the actual VOD buffering. So we do look at it differently, and there are things that the industry is going to have to work toward to accommodate things when 80% of Americans are streaming the Super Bowl and there's really 65 million immediate concurrent ad requests that could be for one single ad or an entire pod of ads. So these are realities that are down the line. These are issues of scale. I think right now we're at a point where these are still fairly manageable problems. They're not necessarily barriers to business, but when you start having 1,000 advertisers competing simultaneously in the New York DMA for the exact same audience segments, now it's going to become an issue. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That's right. We'll solve that problem when I retire. Used to be the saying in TV. Yeah.
Yeah, long gone are the days of VHS cassettes. They have to be submitted by 5 p.m. or something like that. Everything we do is just in time. Everything we do has to be transcoded in advance inside of a streaming layer, and we're rapidly racing towards standards like VAST 4.1 that will offer us the ability to even service the needs of OTT. And then you're right, like when you get down to it, the consumer wins because they're waiting anywhere between 2 and 5 seconds for that, the spinner of death on conventional VAST today. And as soon as we can bury all that inside of the data center, all of a sudden the experience is so much greater.
Yeah. We were talking in the prep room about trends that are coming down the pike. 5G issues like that. This is not something that more bandwidth can solve ultimately, because you've got more complexity, more fragmentation. What's keeping you up at night, Brian? And amidst all this,
what Randy just described sort of is that keeps us up at night, because that means that your guys' problem is really hard. All of yours, because you have to get these platforms to interoperate for the consumer, and we're helping to deliver that. And when I think about 5G, so today the data center is the logical place where that all comes together. And we see that in the connectivity between the players today. Well, when 5G comes, we say, are there things that we want to do at the very edge? So are we going to go out to the radios or to mid-level aggregation points before the data center? I don't know the answer to that question. We're spending a lot of time thinking about that, especially if the cloud, the big hyperscalers, start thinking about aggregation points that are different. Does that fragment things even more? And so I think we're spending a lot of time thinking about, from the tower to the mid-level aggregation to the data center, what role we can play in helping stream to these 65 million, that's a big matrix, 65 million by 1,000 advertisers. How do we support that, especially as we build tethers out to these 5G radios back to our data centers? We think about this exact thing.
The entire business is speeding up from
We
all
can't
angles.
hear you. Okay.
The entire business is speeding up from all angles, right? Whether it's simply ad serving, whether it's content delivery, whether it's the back end work, everything is moving faster. We're a second by second business now, and television is moving that fast, and delivery is moving at a faster rate. So the consumer expects it fast and quick, and the entire ecosystem has to be fast and quick. And I think it changes everything we're doing, in terms of how we move as an organization, how we move in this industry. Everything we're doing, we look at how do we eliminate anything in the middle to move faster as an organization. We do that all the time.
Can I ask a quick question? Have you correlated that spinning wheel of death to churn?
We have looked at that. The spinning wheel of death is pretty much gone.
Okay.
We had to get rid of that quickly.
Okay.
But we certainly did, and it's something we look. We look at a lot of things of churn. Content is one. Price number two. And technology
and performance.
Performance might be 1, 2, or 3 in any particular order. All three of those things we look at all the time, and absolutely we have. And also when the competition starts to move, and there's other places to go. So it was more important than ever over the past year. Last year we spent a ton of time just on performance, on improving our technical work, and that was one of the first things we looked at. Absolutely.
So we got 5 minutes. I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time for audience questions. So if we're back here next year, what is the one thing that you think will have changed in a year, for better or worse?
I'll go first. So, I'll start with sort of some observations of this year. I'm making note of who's not at NAB this year that has been big in the last few years, namely the big programmers. And what it leads me to believe is that perhaps this concept of convergence is not something that will happen, but perhaps it's already happened. And everybody feels very comfortable with what their forward path is in this increasingly fragmented world. They feel an increased confidence perhaps in their ability to package all that audience back up and still holistically represent it to a brand. So, perhaps this year or this time next year, this conversation is really going to evolve to really be about how rapidly is the business growing, not necessarily what will the business be. So,
yeah, I'll definitely say like economies of scale. It's not just the 5G towers and building, centralized data centers that allow us to do this, but it's also just the fact that there'll be so much more transactions happening inside of OTT than before, and so we're still pretty early days, but it's definitely the path that we're on. So, yeah.
Brian, we're back in 1 year. What's different?
Well, I think, so my background was at VeriSign, so an internet security company, and I think a year from now, as more and more business flows this way, and as more and more money flows this way, I think more and more bad guys are going to flow this way. And I think, and fragmented platforms mean you have cracks that you can attack. And so I think security will be more top of mind next year to deal with it. I know it's top of mind now. I think it's going to become increasingly important.
Adam, spinning wheel of death, going to be gone in a year?
He says it's gone.
It has been gone. I would say that for us, less resistance to change. We're all changing. We're changing fast, and I think that now we're starting to see that OTT, CTV, different platforms, cross-platform, different types of things are really starting to happen. They're real. The conversations are now into execution, and I think we'll see less resistance to change and more people involved in this as opposed to kind of older legacy concepts, if you will. So we're changing.
Folks, any questions? This is an incredible group here, the brain trust of advertising. Who out in the audience has a question? Alan, I see you sitting there. You got any questions for these guys?
Alan's always got questions.
I know you've always got questions.
You woke them up.
Yeah.
No?
We answered everything possible.
Incredible. All right.
The future is bright.
The future's bright. It's all IP delivered.
Standards.
All right, folks. Thanks very much.
So continue the conversation with beers over there.
That's right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.